Hello, 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 and welcome to Updog Sports Talk. My name is Matt Miller. Joining me today is my good pal, Justin. What's going on, man?
What is up? It is time. We are here in the train coming down the tracks. We are in that part of the off season where it's time to figure out which teams we are hyping up the rest of the off season. Who are those teams that are going to surprise the college football world and, make the playoff, end up winning more games than expected? Who knows? We're here to break that down tonight. We're going to be picking a surprise team each from the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12 today. Matt, how excited are you for this?
I'm pretty excited, dude. Kind of came off the NFL hangover from the draft and our insight of the draft. Now we get to take another look at college football after the portal closed to see where things are at. I mean, right now, I don't see any reason that why this could change for us throughout the summer. I mean, since we're doing it now, I think it's a good time to get this out there. Not too many people are focused on college football. We're really good at breaking down college football. So if you are joining us for the very, very first time, this program prides ourselves on sticking up for the little guy. Yes, we are talking about SEC today, but SEC moves the needle. We kind of contractually have to talk about the SEC. But we also stick up for FCS teams. We stick up for the Bowling Greens of the world. We stick up for the little guy. Charles Barkley actually echoed that sentiment this past week, bashing ESPN for spending the entire season talking about the Lakers and the Warriors. And the Lakers are out of the playoffs, and I think the Warriors may have been eliminated as well. But he said that ESPN focused so much on the top teams that it wasn't even fun to watch coverage. And he's about to be an ESPN employee, so it's kind of funny to see. But he echoed our sentiment, and that's what we carry at this show. Is we don't just want to talk about the LeBrons of the world, the Patrick Mahomes. We also want to talk about the people that you may never have heard of. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Yeah. I think this upcoming series is going to be a fun one simply because of that. We like to provide coverage across all of college football. So, while we'll be talking about some of the bigger conferences tonight, stay tuned because, after we have a little bye week next week, we'll be diving into in 2 weeks we'll be diving into the ACC. We'll be diving into the American, the Sun Belt, and then the week after that we'll be diving into Mountain West, Maction, and Conference USA. So,
yeah, I will be at a Reds game next week, getting a Pete Rose jersey. Justin will be making a guest appearance on a friend show.
Yeah, stay tuned for that announcement. That one kind of came down the pipeline just earlier today. Very fun, exciting stuff there. I figured while, not on this show, I may as well be on another show. It was one of those things that just kind of came together really quick and worked out perfectly. Very excited about it. Stay tuned for more on that one. I figure I should let the other show announce it first. So.
Maybe. I mean, we won't say whose show we're going on.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have hinted now that we're going to be in the SEC. So, let's get this hype train on the tracks here. Who is your hype train team in the SEC? Who is going to crash the college football playoff or, even surprise in another way?
So before I get to that, I'm going to just preface this with I've never been a fan of this team. I've actually barely ever spoken highly of this team. So this one is new for me.
I think we especially in our early days, we have roasted this team a lot.
Actually. Yeah, we purposely would play this team in college football 25 or NCAA 14 to make sure that they weren't good. But some of the other choices that I had was LSU, because they had good recruiting and stuff, but didn't really want to back Brian Kelly. He left a sour note in my mouth, and they got a few games handed to them last year, so I don't think that's fair. South Carolina, but they lost half their defense to the draft. So my next option is wait. I have a soundboard for this.
Ooh, okay.
Nope, wrong one.
Where's the punch?
The Florida Gators. Florida Gators went 8-5 last year. This year, I think they can go 9-3, potentially even 10-2. They have a favorable schedule early. And then followed by Probably one of the roughest stretches. But they face Long Island. That's a cakewalk. They face South Florida. As much as I want to see South Florida win, I think Florida's going to win. They'll play LSU. I think that'll actually be a really good game. They play at Miami. I think that'll also be a good game. They play at home versus Texas. I think that'll be a good game. At Texas A&M, and then Mississippi State, Georgia, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. So I think they have a pretty favorable schedule handed to them this year. If you look at their recruiting over the last few years, they were 18th in 2022, 13th in 2023, 13th in 2024, but in 2025, they made the jump up to number 7 in the recruiting rankings. They also didn't have a bad time in the portal either. They got some needs. I wouldn't say they were the best team in the portal because there certainly was some pretty good grabs out there by some teams. I think they've addressed a lot, and this is DJ Lagway's year to show the world what he can be. He stepped in as a true freshman, and handled business okay. I mean, a lot of players had left, so it was pretty much just him. And kind of stepped into a team that, like, he didn't expect to be starting right away. I think now he has the intangibles to take that next step. I think he can lead this team. I wouldn't say they are definite lock for the playoff, but I think they're fringe. I think they can sneak their way in if they hold true to what I'm saying.
I would say based on the strength of schedule, even 3 losses could potentially get them in.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a few top 15, top 10 teams. I mean, I think they can probably beat LSU, but I chalk them in as a loss just because LSU is more experienced. I don't have very high praise for Carson Beck. I think that Florida beats Miami, loses to Texas. Right. I think they can beat Texas A&M. Mississippi State is a train wreck. I think they can beat them. They'll probably lose to Georgia. Beat Kentucky. I do think that they can beat Ole Miss because Ole Miss had a lot of players leave for the draft. Tennessee is kind of in a downward spiral right now, so I feel like Florida can take advantage of that. And then Florida State, more than likely they're not going to repeat last year, but I still don't think they're going to be as good as the year before. So I have them beating Florida State as well. So just feel like Florida has the intangibles and the strength of schedule mixed in with a few easy wins to just prop them up and tell the committee, hey, we're an SEC team that you used to love. Love us again.
Yeah. Yeah, Billy Napier is starting to cook on the recruiting trail. He has his quarterback in place. It sounds like it's time. It sounds like it's time for the Florida Gators to be a factor again.
Yeah.
But I am going in a different direction than you are. I am going with the Texas A&M Aggies. I think some friends of the show who are, typically slightly on the pessimistic side of being Texas A&M fans probably will need to turn away from this part, but because I'm about to talk a lot of good about the Aggies. I am a huge fan of Mike Elko, their head coach. I think he was the right hire. He was someone who is, I feel like Texas A&M's had a lot of nonsense around. He's a no-nonsense guy who is just ready to build this program up. The big thing is they are, by almost all accounts, and obviously I know, I don't mention a specific thing here because, returning production stats right now are a little bit up in the air at the spring portal, but right now Texas A&M is top 5 in returning production in the whole country, and I believe that is nice. That is unanimous among pretty much any stat line I've seen so far. That being said, though, our friends over at the Punt and Rally have a website where they have been tracking their own and some others as well, so I would definitely recommend checking that out. Marcel Reed is back. He was a dynamic and electric runner for Texas A&M last year. His mobility gave teams fits, especially LSU, when they took down the Tigers in a dominant second half performance there. But I also believe he was kind of run first out of necessity. Texas A&M really lacked dynamic receiving weapons. That's going to change this year. They brought in Casey Concepcion from NC State. I hope I got that pronunciation right. But they brought him in. Terry Bussey, who was a highly rated recruit, is in year 2. He's ready to break out. And, they have a couple other transfers that really helped revamp this room. And I think we're going to see more out of the Aggies passing game. And obviously, continuity on the offensive line with Le'Veon Moss in the backfield is going to make their run game really, really good. That's the kind of stuff that travels, even in the SEC. The defensive line is maybe the one concern on the defensive side. There's a lot of experience back generally and all of that, but the defensive line, we just saw, 3 guys get drafted. So clearly a lot of losses there. They did hit the portal to help with that. And so far, early spring notes seem to be promising about some of these portal guys. So I think they're good to go there. And again, experience back in the defense is going to improve there. I believe, guys are going to communicate better. That'll help the run fits out a little bit because that was their main weakness on defense last year was just, every once in a while they got gashed by some run plays. So that's going to improve. And the schedule is, there's some challenges in here, but it's not too bad. There is, the big road showdown against Notre Dame. That one's going to be a big game. In the SEC, they get, I would say, a lot more, they have tough road games. Arkansas, apparently they're not doing their whole neutral site thing in Jerry World anymore. So that one's at Arkansas. And then they play at LSU the next week. But, if LSU has not fixed their run defense, then, obviously, I'm sure, they hit a lot of people in the portal. I'm not a big fan of LSU right now, but, not a fan of their team. I think they're a little bit overhyped. So I think that's a game that Texas A&M has a shot at. But, and then at Missouri, so they have a bye week in there, but they do have 3 straight road games. That's going to be a critical stretch. But what I do like is that, they get Auburn at home. They get Florida at home. They get South Carolina at home. They beat Florida last year, but Auburn and South Carolina, those are some road games towards the end of the year that really sent the Aggie season off in the wrong direction. I like that they get those games at home this time. And, we have the big one there at the end, at Texas. That one might be a little bit difficult to win, I'll be honest. I'm seeing here, I think at a minimum, I see 9-3. Maybe if the Aggies can take down LSU and Baton Rouge, they can crash the college football playoff. Watch out for it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on the chat box. A few people chimed in. What's up, Mr. First Down? I think that, who was your team? Texas A&M can go 8-4 next year. I do think that they are on the up and up. But I was a little weary of their defensive production after losing, I'd say, most of their defensive line at this point.
Yeah. So. And like I said, I mean that is one of their bigger concerns. But I have confidence in the portal fits that they grab there. It will be very interesting to see how it goes. And obviously, the other thing with Texas A&M, we have to watch out for that late season slide. That has been an issue since Jimbo Fisher was there. That is something they need to make sure they avoid. What helps is the fact that, they, at least this year, they get a bye week in November 1st. So a moment there to kind of get right a little bit. And, at Missouri does not intimidate me too much. They get South Carolina at home. The break against Samford. And then, obviously the big one there at Texas is going to be, that one's going to be a tough one. I struggle to see a win there, but overall, I think things are looking good in Aggie land for once. And I know there's some Aggies out there who aren't willing to believe until it happens, but I think 2025 is their year. You mentioned you had some comments in the chat, so you may as well let any of the other viewers know what's going on.
Rob says, yo, you guys are wrong. Ball State, baby. Sidelines _BSU. Show sounds great. So shout out.
Ball State mentioned. I love it.
Yeah, love it. We're big Mac fans, so love when it gets mentioned.
I finally got a Ball State shirt the other week. So that gets me 11 of the 13 Mac teams. I'm so close. So close.
Hey, I mean, we're in Mac country. So everything's within 5 hours of us.
Well, except for the two I don't have, NIU and UMass.
Well, NIU is no longer a MAC school.
Yeah, technically it's 12 or 13 depending on what year you look at.
So, what do you say? We move on to the Big Ten?
It's time for the Big Ten.
Time for the Big Ten. One of my favorite teams to talk about in the Big Ten, and one that I feel like 95% of the country is rooting to do well, to bring back the blue blood of the 80s and 90s. Nebraska football. I think they're back, Justin. I mean, each year is another step, another scratch and claw back to the top. And guess what this year is, Justin?
What is it?
Third-year Matt Rule. Third-year Matt Rule has a ridiculously good record. He takes a huge step. Love Matt Rule, but last year 7-6 was a bit of a disappointment. Do you wanna bet against them this year, Justin?
There are some people that do. It was, I think, we've been stirring up a little bit of hype around Nebraska and the opportunities we've gotten here in the last week or so. And let's just say the responses have been very divided.
Yeah. I mean, they did lose a few people to the portal, but they also got a good following or a good showing from their offensive line transfer portal guys. Like they got tackle, defensive lineman, wide receiver. I think they got a guard too. So they're shoring everything up. When you look at their schedule, and this pains me to say because it's week 1, I think they can beat Cincinnati. I think that as long as Nebraska comes out hot, they can stick to what I'm telling them that they should be doing. Beat Cincinnati, beat Akron, beat Houston Christian. Probably, I'm going to give them a loss to Michigan. I think Michigan can have a bounce-back year.
Hey, but Sharon Moore is not coaching that game.
No, but I think from top to bottom, Michigan has better players. I think they can beat Michigan State, and by the time they play Maryland, it's October Maryland, and October Maryland I think is winless in the past 10 years.
I do think they randomly came back to beat USC this past year, and that was one of their 4 wins overall.
They play Minnesota around the time where Minnesota always picks things up. So I'm going to give them a loss to Minnesota. So right now they've lost to Michigan and Minnesota. They'll beat Northwestern. I still think that they can beat USC. I don't think UCLA is quite there yet to start beating everyone. So I think Nebraska can beat UCLA. And then I'm going to give them a loss to Penn State and Iowa. Now, because it's year 3 Matt Rule, I'm going to go on a bold prediction here and say that they're going to beat Iowa. I'm going to give them that one extra win to get them to 9-3.
Okay. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned young Mahomes yet.
I don't know why he is trying to look exactly like Patrick Mahomes, but Dylan Raiola needs to stop. Be your own guy. It does help that he has family and the coaching staff. It does help that he was a 5-star recruit. I do think that he can take a big step forward this season, but Justin, remember last year, his struggles?
Yeah, he started out hot at the beginning of the year, and then, as they entered conference play, things kind of trailed off.
Not just conference play. Do you remember the breakdown of man versus zone?
No, break it down for us.
If I remember correctly, and I have a terrible memory, so quote me if I'm wrong, Justin. Correct me if I'm wrong. Dylan Raiola had a 97% completion percentage against man, but then a 40% completion percentage against zone. And if there's that big of a disparity, or maybe it was passer rating. But I mean, he was ridiculously good against man and ridiculously bad against zone. So as long as he can be okay against zone and still be ridiculously good against man, I think this team's going to come out okay. They got Dane Key from Kentucky. He's a solid, underrated receiver, so that'll be a good weapon for him. They got the Missouri defensive tackle, so they can stop the run finally. I think that was a big issue last year. And then they got Elijah Pritchett, the Alabama tackle. So now they have a guy that can block for Dylan Raiola. And I think this is where we can see Nebraska take that next step. Who do you think is going to come in here?
I am going with the Iowa Hawkeyes. They are a team that they have been struggling on offense for years now. One of the worst offenses in college football, really. And, despite that, they're, hanging around, winning 8 games a year and all that. Now, guess what? They finally have a quarterback. Mark Gronowski, 2-time FCS national champion, is coming in to save this program. He is their best quarterback they have had since Ricky Stanzi was with the program. So they finally have that position resolved. Overall, the Hawkeyes have a decent amount of returning production. I've seen them, somewhere between 30 and 35 overall. They lost Caleb Johnson. That is a big loss. I think Kamari Moulton, a lot of promising signs from the spring so far. I think he's ready to step in, lead the way, and become another one of the great running backs in the lineage of Iowa running backs. Another positive sign for the Hawkeyes, they have a young group of receivers, but so far in the spring, despite some guys being injured and out, they've seen a lot of encouraging signs in their receivers so far in the spring. I think it helps that, they have quarterbacks who are ready to fire it in there, a more confident and competent offensive play caller in Tim Lester. This offense is finally going to go. That is a huge key. There's some losses on the defensive side, but let's face it, this is a Phil Parker defense. No matter what, we know they're going to be a tough defensive team and a tough defense that nobody wants to go against. They're a nightmare to face on defense, always. And then finally, the real thing that's really bringing this home for the Hawkeyes, they have a very favorable schedule. Their toughest games, the toughest teams they play, Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana they have Iowa State as well. Those are probably the 4 toughest games they have. 3 of the 4 are at home in Kinnick, where Iowa is already very difficult to play. Iowa State, yes, Iowa State is the only team to beat Iowa in Kinnick last year. But guess what? Iowa's been really good at winning at Iowa State lately. So that's a huge key as well. I think they're going to be able to take that game. I think they can beat Indiana. These other road games do not worry me. At Wisconsin, at USC, at Nebraska, I think Iowa sweeps all of those. The Iowa Hawkeyes, they could even, if they get upset one of those games, maybe they pull an upset to make up for it against Penn State or Oregon even. Either way, I'm making my declaration now. The Iowa Hawkeyes go 10-2 and crash the college football playoff.
I wouldn't mind that. The funny thing? Both Iowa and Nebraska were really good at home last year. Iowa was 6-1, Nebraska was 5-2. Both of them bad on the road.
Yeah. It was a huge disparity for Iowa. They actually started to steamroll teams at home. They won 3 straight games where they scored in the 40s and only gave up 10 to 15 points. Well, technically Washington scored 16. They beat Washington 40-16. Next home game, they beat Northwestern 40-14. They beat Wisconsin 40-10. Iowa's major issue, fortunately this won't be super tested this year. Iowa's major issue is playing on the road. They lost 35-7 to Ohio State, 32-20 to Michigan State, 20-17 to UCLA. That was a rough one. But, this year, the road schedule is not too bad. There's not, like I said, there's not a whole lot on the road that worries me. At least in terms of, if Iowa plays their best game. Yes, if they get sloppy and have a bad game, things could go wrong and maybe they don't crash the playoff. But right now, I'm confident the Hawkeyes come out, have a great year, and they're a surprise team that crashes the playoff.
We'll have to see. That last game of the year, I guess we may have to try to go to that.
Yeah, no, that last game of the year is really going to determine which of us is right.
Last game of the year, Brent, can't hold anything back.
Needless to say, based on past history, I feel really good about that one.
Moving on to our final conference of the day, the Big 12.
Oh yeah, we're picking a sleeper out. We're picking a team out of the Big 12. Guess what?
Wild, Wild West.
It really is. I mean, it's not entirely West, but this conference really is the Wild West.
Hey, it's West to us. And East, I guess. Back to the Big Ten. If Iowa and Nebraska are doing, what we think they're going to do, we may actually have to try to go to that game. 100%.
If there's a college football playoff spot on the line, yeah.
Yeah. So back to the Big 12. As much as I want to overhype Cincinnati, as much as I want to overhype someone else, I gotta go with the team that arguably might have one of the best transfer portal years of this offseason. The Texas Tech Red Raiders. Now, last year didn't turn out so well for them. They did finish 8-5 and were 2 games out of first place, and they were in it for most of the year. But they kind of were playing behind the whole. This year, I don't think they're going to be playing behind unless they just magically decide not to play football. They don't have the best recruiting class, but their transfer portal got really, really good players. They got an interior offensive lineman, so they can finally block. They got 2 edge rushers and a tackle. They fixed every need they had. Now they can get after the quarterback, and now they can block. When it comes to their style of play, Justin, do you think they're going to just throw the ball all over the field?
I mean, we know they will, but, Texas Tech has quietly been running it a little bit more than they have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, they have the roster for success, but I think now they can get back to what they do best and pass the ball. Yeah, they'll probably run the ball a little bit more often, but now they can be a little bit more dangerous in the pass game. But they also have a very favorable schedule. Play Arkansas Pine Bluff, Kent State, Oregon State. Their first big test is Utah, and I think they can take that one. Houston, Kansas. Then their biggest test, Arizona State. I do think they lose that game despite Arizona State missing a lot of their players from last year. Oklahoma State, Kansas State. Lose to BYU, UCF. I think they can still get a win over that and beat West Virginia. So I think they can also crash the college football play.
You think they're winning the Big 12?
I do think they're going to win the Big 12.
There we go.
I think Texas Tech is just one of those slept-on teams that everyone looked at last year and was like, BYU was really good. They're going to be really good this year. Arizona State was really good. They're going to be really good this year. I've even seen a lot of people say Utah is going to bounce back this year. While all those are valid points, all of those people were overlooking Texas Tech. Not to say that they're wrong, but I do think Arizona State takes a step back. I think BYU takes a little bit of a step back, and I think that Utah, they finished 5-7 last year. I think they will do better, but I don't think they're gonna do as good as Texas Tech. Texas Tech to the college football playoff. Write that down.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting offseason. The one thing is, you're not alone in that one. I've definitely noticed, a little bit of excitement building for Texas Tech. The big thing is, the big key for the Red Raiders this year, Baron Morton needs to be healthy. They also need to make sure they avoid that just awful loss. They can't have that game where they just don't show up and lose by 30. I do think it helps them, although it's also disappointing that we don't have the Butts Bowl this year. And it actually was supposed to be the Butt Bowl because it would be at Baylor. But yeah, so that one's a little bit disappointing not on the schedule. I don't know what you're doing, Big 12, but get it together. Texas Tech, though, that is a hot team this offseason. That is a team that I think a lot of people are starting to circle on their calendars right now and look at and go, you know what? This could be the team out of the Big 12 this year. They are red hot on the recruiting trail. And it's going to be fun to see these pieces come together and what they can do. That being said, my team is different. I am on the Kansas Jayhawks. Jalen Daniels is back, and I feel like that has not been talked about at all this offseason, really. I haven't seen that anywhere. He kind of quietly announced he had another year when we were in that weird 10-day period between the semifinals and the national championship where everyone kind of was tired about hyping the game. Wasn't ready to talk about the offseason, but was, not really talking about the current game either because 10 days is too long to talk about it. And, he came back. Matt, before I get on to the next point, what do you got there?
2 things. One, Texas Tech got a quarterback last year or 2 years ago from Justin, Texas.
Really now?
Yeah.
I have a city in Texas. How about that?
Second thing isn't this Daniels' 6th year?
It feels like it. It feels like he's been there forever at this point.
And I'm pretty sure this is his second team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. He's been at Kansas this whole time, I think.
Has he really?
Maybe look that up real quick, but
yeah,
I cannot remember a time where he was not at Kansas. And, honestly, I may be breaking news to a lot of people right now because I'm pretty sure at least 75% of college football fans thought for sure that he was finally out of years last year. But guess what? He's not, and he's ready to get back to playing at a high level. One of the big keys for their offense is that offense coordinator Jim Zabrowski is taking over. I think he was always considered a high riser in their coaching staff. And I feel like, they made the mistake last year by going with Jeff Grimes instead of him. They've corrected that mistake. Grimes is off to Wisconsin. And Zabrowski now has taken over the reins. I think he's a better fit for the offense. We kind of saw last year. Huh?
This is his 5th year, but there is a Jalen Daniels playing quarterback for Norfolk State.
And Michael Vick, shout out. Yeah, so, I think, this was a good, sorry, you got lost my train of thought there, but we saw last year with Jeff Grimes, like the offense was just a tick off. Like Kansas was in all of their early losses. They were right there. Something with the install or something, like they were just seconds off on every play. And, it turned, plays that would have been scores into turnovers and stuff like that. So I think we're going to see a much smoother operation this year with the new offensive coordinator in place. Running back Devin Neal is gone, but that's okay. Daniel Highshaw Jr. is ready to step in and lead the way and be running one of the best running backs in the Big 12. He's already looked good in all the time that he's played. He's going to crush it this year. And the offensive line. The offensive line is very experienced. They're going to pave the way for Daniels and Highshaw in that run game. That run game, which, by the way, just tore up the conference there in the last month of the season. When they went on that crazy run where they beat three straight ranked teams. They brought in some receivers from the portal to kind of help out that position. And they also utilized the portal to revamp defense. They saw the defense had not been good enough. Wasn't making up for the fact that the offense was just a tick down last year. So they decided, the offense is getting their stuff together. The defense needs to step up as well. We need to bring in some guys from the portal to help improve that defense, and that's what they did. So far, all signs are very encouraging on that side of the ball. Finally, my last point on the Kansas Jayhawks is the schedule looks pretty good. I don't mind a lot of their games. They avoid Arizona State. That's really one of the teams I've circled as someone who's almost certainly going to be good. They also avoid BYU. They have a couple tough road games in there. They have Missouri in their non-conference. Missouri has a lot of pieces to replace on offense. By the way, I'm very glad this game is back. This is an old school rivalry that I remember seeing for a long time. I always remember the 2007 game when Kansas and Missouri were, I think, like number 1 and 2 or something like that in that wild year. That game was played in Arrowhead, I think. That was Kansas's only loss that year. It's really, really cool to finally see these two playing each other again. It's great to have that game back. So shout out to both programs getting that scheduled. Back to who Kansas plays. At Texas Tech, as you mentioned, that's going to be a tough game. That's going to be a tough one, for sure. They also play at Iowa State late in the year. Now, if Iowa State has not shored up their run defense, Kansas is going to be able to take advantage of that one again. I don't think that's an impossible one. At home against Kansas State is going to be a critical game in the race. Kansas State has very much owned the series lately. Kansas needs to reverse that this year. Otherwise, their other road games at UCF and at Arizona, those are teams that are sort of figuring themselves out. They may not be contenders in the Big 12 this year. So I really like that. Kansas is also opening a new stadium, their renovated stadium, so there's a lot of hype around that. Their home game is going to be electric. They have the Week 0 opener against Fresno State, which is going to be a lot of fun. Needless to say, I see the Kansas Jayhawks going 10-2. I think they reached the Big 12 championship.
Interesting. That's what we thought that was going to happen last year.
Yep, we are a year ahead.
Well, that wraps up our conferences for today. So look for Florida, Nebraska, Texas Tech, or who are your teams?
Iowa, Kansas.
Iowa, Kansas, and who was the SEC team?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M.
I really stuck into Heartland for this one.
Yeah. So watch for any of those teams to be good next year. You can write it down if we're right or wrong. Feel free to comment who your teams are that you are looking forward to seeing next year. But follow us at Updog Sports Talk on all social media. Like, subscribe, show us some love. Trying to hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So help us get there. And then anything else, Justin? Any housekeeping items?
That is everything. Get ready. We have a bye week next week, but in 2 weeks, we'll be looking at our teams for the ACC, the American, and the Fun Belt.
Yeah. Reminder, I'm going to be at the Reds game. So I may put out a short or whatever. Beautiful Bearded Bastard says hi. We say goodbye to everybody else. So we'll catch you 2 weeks from now. Not next week. Almost slipped up there. And
bye week next week.
Yeah, in the meantime, catch us on Twitter with any updates. So we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.